Welcome to this week's Boots on the Ground. In today's episode, we explore everything related to communication, copy, and consistency in what else but Toronto real estate. In particular, the intersection of the evolving written word and brand messaging. As video and AI tools like ChatGPT and Grammarly rise in popularity, how do brands maintain a singular, impactful voice across various mediums? Is the written word truly in decline, or is it just transforming? Great question. Join us as we unravel these questions and more, discussing the future of written communication in a rapidly digitizing world. My name is Ralph Fox, and I'm the co-founder and broker of record of Fox Marin, and I will be your host today. Lucky you guys. For today's discussion, I couldn't think of two better real estate communicators, our in-house copywriters and email composition tycoons. Absolutely the best in the business. Introducing the infamous Kori Marin, broker and co-founder of Fox Marin, who is the brand voice behind every social media post, video scripting, real estate description, and heaps of blog posts and content. Next to Kori is our wonderfully lovable Jessica Spillas, the queen of acquisitions and broker and VP sales, who has revolutionized the art of emails, drip campaigns, intake forms, questionnaires, pricing proposals, and everything else in between. Between these two, they have written enough content to publish a complete series. Volumes 1 to 10, including a worldwide book tour, perhaps could be in their future. Guys, so great to have you here. Thank you for listening to my voice. And I am so excited to hear both of your beautiful voices as we start to dig into this. This one, going to be a barn burner.
Thank you, Ralph. I just want to say that was an incredible intro. I think Ian Busher is listening to this somewhere with a tear in his eye. Very, very proud.
Busher, I'm coming for you.
And I would just like to say that I thought the copywriting for that introduction was particularly well written, thanks to the work that I did in advance to send that to you in a Google Doc so you could read it. So I just want to acknowledge that since this is the topic.
We have to give credit where credit is due today.
And I think it was well edited too, but that's just my opinion.
Of course, you always need a pat on the back, Ralph. Always, no matter what.
Even if I have to give it to myself, I'll take it. All right. Well, this is off to a great start already. I can see the viewers are in for a treat.
Me too. The energy's in the room. All right.
Exactly. In the house. Okay. So let's kick things off with a short background about both of your writing backgrounds and how this part of the business in particular falls under your responsibilities.
Yeah, how is
why
that?
this how did that happen?
Jess and I really want to know the answer. Maybe you know, Ralph, because we're still asking.
Yeah, first of all, it's all about strengths and weaknesses. And if you, I maintain, have the best team in real estate, if you look at everybody on our team, there is a very clear understanding why this responsibility has landed on the two of you. And so maybe as opposed to speaking to strengths and weaknesses, we can start off with speaking to some of our strengths, which happen to be the two of you in being able to communicate.
Okay, well, I love it. Well, I'm happy to kick off my massive copywriting background. Yes, this has become my default responsibility on the Fox Marin team for sure. And I can certainly say with all confidence that writing has never been one of my strongest skill sets. And high school, I was very challenged with essay writing, often got very poor marks on my essays in English class, hated it. My mom used to edit all of my papers and she would just redline them, basically like rewrite them because she just made me feel like they were so poorly done. She has exceptional grammar skills and always thought that my writing was probably a little bit more on the style of like an advertising kind of vibe. I like to write like I speak. So that never landed well in academia. So I was always really challenged in high school. I think my voice evolved a little bit better once I moved to university and was encouraged to flourish a bit more on that side. And of course, copywriting and writing and essays and papers just become a large part of your academic career. So I think I grew in strength there. However, moving into the corporate sales world, I had to write a gazillion emails. I think that was helpful. But I think the thing that has really inspired my copywriting skills per se is that there's just been nobody else to do it when I moved over to real estate. And I quickly just evolved and used my voice. So as mentioned, I like to write like I speak. And so I think that's really translated really well in real estate so that we have consistent brand messaging. I always like to write our real estate descriptions in a more energetic, interesting, characteristic way. And over time, I've just developed a style, and my confidence in writing has certainly improved over the years because I have been forced to do it, whether it's a blog post or writing a description for a listing or email campaigns or a newsletter or a blog post. I think over time, my voice has just evolved. And once I started getting good feedback about it, I think I just grew in confidence, and then a style started to develop. And now it's pretty effortless for me to do it. And I think it's actually become one of my strengths in the business versus a weakness, which I would have called it many years ago.
I love what you said, Kori. Writing is very much like a muscle. And if you don't use it, you lose it very quickly. And I actually really appreciate the fact that you came into this not from a writing background, because you actually bring such a fresh perspective to real estate. And I feel like so much of the copy is very monotonous and all starts to sound and look the same. And so I really appreciate your writing style and your ability to connect with an audience like you were speaking to them, because selling real estate is not like writing an essay. Nobody's really interested in reading essays that are super poised and very professional and corporate sounding. I think if you want to connect with an audience, you do need to speak to them like you're talking to them in person. And I will also say that I think that's why we balance each other out so well, is because I actually came from a writing background. So conversely, when I was in high school, my number one priority was ballet. That's a whole story for another day. Second to that, I did always love to write. It was always a very cathartic experience for me, and I very much leaned into that muscle, and I would write both in school, outside of school, which is why I ultimately went on to study journalism. And I never fully understood how important that skill would be when I came into the real estate industry. And I think that was part of the reason why I had a more seamless transition than I think most do. And I'll never forget, I think it was my first 2 weeks in real estate, I sent an email to another agent and they responded and they said, "That was an incredible email." And I thought, why am I getting compliments for this? This should just be a baseline. And then I quickly realized that when you have 70,000 agents in the GTA and a very low barrier of entry and a lot of part-timers, you do start to see a lot of emails with spelling errors, grammar errors, not to be a stickler, but in corporate backgrounds, your emails and your communications were everything. And I wrote so many proposals and performas, and I really developed that skill from writing, let's just say, in a novelistic way to business writing, which is a whole other thing.
Totally.
And learning the art of effective communication. So I would say that that is one of the skills that I had more innately coming into this industry. And I'm so grateful for that, because it is a huge part of what we do. And I think a very underappreciated part of what we do that the public just does not see.
Exactly. And I love the fact that our voices have blended over time and that we've instilled some of your business writing and the wonderful templates you've developed and that background that you've brought to the table with a bit more of my conversational style emails that are a little bit more energetic and have a lot of exclamation marks and are definitely very open to being like, we're easy to work with, we're trustworthy, we're fun. Like, let's not make this so formal and challenging. Let's make this all about being exciting and an adventure. Let's go on this together. And I think a lot of the words that we select and using lots of exclamation marks and tossing in some emojis here and there just always just help people feel like, okay, I can talk to these people.
Totally.
And I can relax around them, and it's okay if I'm not perfect all the time.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that my communications certainly have a lot more emojis and exclamation marks than they did before I joined the Fox Marin team. So I appreciate that level of funness that you brought to my writing. And I do think it, like I said, it disarms people in a way to know that you can be open, honest, transparent with us. We are objective third parties in this process. It doesn't have to be super tight-knit and white collar. We can connect on a meaningful level so that we can build trust together. And that's really what 100%. It's about.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just have a question for both of you guys.
Okay.
And it's coming from different perspectives because you guys work in different perspectives in the business. Kori more on the listing side, Jessica more on the buying side, although both you guys do crossover from time to time. But I'm going to ask Kori to answer this question from the listing side and Jessica from the buying side. And this can be all encompassing, but how have you seen things change? Like, I know most people are very much aware that people's attention spans are shrinking. And, it's getting to the point where do people even read anymore? So to Kori from the listing side, Jessica from the buyer side, it can be with other agents or our clients or our team. How has that shifted? Because you both have now been in the business for a while. How has that changed? And how has that in turn impacted the way you in turn communicate being effective communicators? And I'll start with Jessica.
Ooh, thank you, Ralph. It's a great question. I've certainly seen that style of communication and attention spans just across the board shorten with the onset of things like TikTok and Instagram posts and videos. I think people are very quick to demand and expect answers right now, right away. They don't really want to read through the noise and the intro and the conclusions. They just want to get to the meat and potatoes, and they want to get on with their day. And I think that has been a real challenge for me because my individual communication style is that I like to do a lot of hand holding. I like to educate. And I think that the details are quite important. So myself, I've had to shift the way that I send this data and information to my clients so that they actually grasp it by switching up the platforms or ways that I'm sending them the information. So as an example, 8 years ago, I would have sent them an 8-page email.
Yes, you would have.
We would call them Jessica emails.
With a litany of steps that you would have to execute from start to finish in order to have a successful purchase, and all of my tips and tricks. And, no one really wants to read these long emails. And so now...
And I'll just interrupt. Like, it's a question, is it want or even can? Like, can even people do it at this point, unless their life depends on it?
That's right. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, there are certain people that do love to read and they love the touch and the feel and the smell of pages in a book. I don't think that there will ever really be anything that will replace that. But when it comes to real estate, especially the pace of real estate in Toronto, I think people just need information quickly and concisely so that they can get started and execute their purchasing or selling endeavors right away. What I have switched up personally is I've, of course, shortened my emails, but I also will now meet with somebody on video and have a conversation with them instead of outlining all of this in a very lengthy email that no one really is going to read. And then after that video call, I might follow up with a few key points. But instead of trying to give everyone all the information from the onset right away, I sort of segment it now. And even while I'm on showings with clients, I'm constantly educating them. I'm constantly giving them tips, tricks, secrets of the trade, if you will, And I find that in those smaller sound bites, people are able to absorb the information and retain it a lot better than sending an email. And then you're like, I told you this 3 months ago. And they're like, oh, and that long-winded email, like, I'm not going to read that.
Let me re-forward the email that I sent you because it was all outlined there.
Yeah, as per my email on January 2nd, 2023.
Remember we used to all do that? That was such a corporate thing to do.
Yeah.
As per my email.
Yeah.
And when I'm like, you were copied on it. Like that was such a part of corporate culture back in the day, copying everybody in the whole company.
Yeah. And then you like forward them the email with their email on it. As you can see, this was sent to you on.
And remember when we used to use Outlook and you'd attach the email as like a little envelope for proof? Oh my God, mean. We were such mean emailers back in the day.
Corporate satisfaction.
Yeah, and it was so satisfying. You were copied. You were blind copied.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think it's also true. I feel like the same on the selling side. We definitely meet in video. We definitely meet in person. Same thing that you had mentioned about those things. And then when we do our follow-up proposal, I'd send a select amount of slides with the key information that's really helpful to have written down for the seller to review. And then now we do follow up with a video follow-up.
Yeah.
So I've summarized what we talked about in a video and then I send it on Vimeo. Or I text it. If it's not too long, I'll just text it over. I can't believe how much I just pop on video now, whether it's a Zoom call or just record a video and send it with the information. I know it's a lot easier for people to listen on the go. It's easier for them to retain it this way. And then they're able to connect with me on personality as well, energy level, again, building trust. And I can articulate my thoughts a lot more effortlessly in a video than I could trying to use 10 emojis and like 16 exclamation marks to let them know that this is going to be fun and exciting. And then the other thing I think we really started doing, and Ralph, I'm sure you can attest to this, is we've moved over a lot of our conversation to text. So with all of our sellers, we started group chat, whether it's on Apple Message or WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. And this is where we communicate about the day-to-day stuff. And that's where we have that back and forth instant communication that goes beyond the email or beyond the keynote presentation, beyond the slides, beyond the blog post. And then this is where all the banter happens, which is actually hilarious. And I often say, by the time we have sold your property, we'll be able to print out this entire text chain and it will be hilarious because we can talk about all the fun stuff that goes down and the crazy things that happen. All the storytelling can happen there. And I think this is, and often I miss everybody when after they've sold the property, we don't have that back and forth communication. I always say this to Ralph actually almost every time. Like, oh my gosh, I miss them.
Yeah.
Or because we're not talking every day all the time, I always go, are they mad at us? Because we just aren't communicating as much. So those are some key changes over the time. But I feel like it's a breakup. So I totally agree. Like the art of the long format email is like totally over. And I think even with blog post writing, with social media writing, and any of the other content we developed, I'll often break it up into bullet points as well and more sound bites so people can get the information and extract it quickly without having to read in paragraph form.
The other thing that I think is equally as important, even if you are writing the most concise of emails, is formatting of that email. So Kori, you raise a great point. The use of bullets, highlighting, underlining. Mm-hmm. This allows people to absorb it at a glance.
Something else I really wanted to talk about is storytelling. People in sales and marketing always say that the most effective way to sell is through storytelling. And real estate being, residential real estate especially, being as emotional of a business and purchase as it is, how does that come into play when you guys are trying to communicate selling a property with a client or for a client?
Well, we always use the adage, people buy on emotion and justify with logic afterwards. And this is something we're constantly reminding our sellers. But I don't think this necessarily always comes down to just the words. I think the story is the entire package. So when we're talking about selling a property, we're talking about, yes, the copywriting, the select words that are used to highlight the property. Let's say, for example, in the feature sheet, which has a very much magazine quality to it. But then we're also incorporating the visual effects as well, which obviously would be beautiful photography, a short form video, long form video. I think the print materials are part of this as well. And I think if we think of the story as being very sensory and that we're appealing to our audience at all ages, different demographics, and style of learning and absorbing information, then that way we're fully encompassing the potential prospects by making sure we're hitting them in all of those different ways. I want them to pick up the feature sheets and feel, even if it's subconscious, even if they don't even know, that it just feels expensive and the paper quality feels good. It just makes them feel better about the property, having something tactile in their hands, or reading copy. And again, not being like, this was well written or there's no grammar mistakes, and not necessarily consciously having a conversation with themselves about it. It just feels good to take in information that has emotion in it or is well written or doesn't have an error in it, because you're not picking up on that. So that's building trust. When you look at a picture or a photograph, that doesn't have any dust bunnies sitting on the floor, and you're not distracted by wires attached to the lamps or clutter in the background, it just looks and feels better. So I think when we talk storytelling, I think we're talking about all those components combined and bringing it together to bring a property to life.
I always like to think of how we tell stories in a similar way to how big brands will advertise their products. They're also telling stories, but they have the advantage of time to permeate a message into consumers' minds. For example, a Louis Vuitton bag, they actually primarily market to people that make under 100,000 a year, because the statement of owning a Louis Vuitton bag is, I appreciate the finer things in life, I appreciate luxury, and them wanting to be in that group. When it comes to real estate, we treat every listing like it is a brand, and we need to tell that individual story to a targeted audience. So I think, number one, understanding who that audience is a huge part of it. And like Kori said, like not distracting them from that story, which is part of the reason why the first thing that we tell all of our sellers is to remove any personal objects or personal photos. How can a future buyer envision themselves in a space and then they're staring at a bunch of photos of another family and another couple living there? It puts a full stop on that vision. So what we try to do as a whole is really allow for them to have no other reason than to see themselves, their future, what their lifestyle will be like living in that property. One thing that I always do when I run open houses especially is I will pick up some treats from local bake shops or local coffee shops to introduce them to those neighborhood gems and really allow them to connect with that little 4-block radius, what their lives would be like if they lived there, walking to the local coffee shop every morning, going to the dog park with your dog, meeting new people there. I think these are all really important elements that aren't overtly obvious when you're just staring at an MLS listing.
I totally agree. And speaking of that, I have all of our supplies for our open house today sitting back here, which are very tempting for me to jump into, but I will not crack. And I also think
I just have to interact because as Jess was saying this,
you're thinking about the donuts.
I was like, oh my God, Kori obviously must have gotten some items for the open house we're both doing today.
I do.
And she had them in the house. She didn't even tell me that they were in the house.
They're over there.
So she's, what do you have stashed away just for reference? Because
I have salted chocolate covered pretzels.
Ooh.
I have chocolate chip cookies.
Yum.
I have like a bunch of things. I selected a lot based on how they're going to look on the platter.
Those were in our house all last night?
No, I got them this morning. So that's one example.
Okay. I was like,
and then the other,
they're not fresh.
They have to be fresh. Exactly. And then one other part of the whole sensory storytelling component that I just want to jump on what Jessica was saying is we always play music. And it's not because we feel like the music is going to inspire the buyer to purchase, but it just makes them more comfortable in this space. Again, it's just part of the experience and there's no dead silence. Like nothing is more awkward than walking into a retail space or a restaurant when it's like quiet and you're just like whispering. And I want the buyers and their agents to feel like they can have conversations or talk to us and it doesn't feel like that awkward vibe. So I already have our speaker right now being charged on the other side of the space so that we are ready to go for today, because that's another element which just adds to the entire complete package.
I'm so glad you brought that up because there's a whole other level of communication, which is energy. And that's why we have in open houses, we have the music going. And it's the same thing that we have a rule on our team. Kori and I came from a background where we both did a lot of trade shows. And in a trade show, rule number one is you never sit down, like ever,
Never.
because that is bad juju when someone walks into your booth. And it's the same thing when someone walks into an open house. You should be standing, there should be music, there should be good energies, and you should be greeting people at the level at which they are coming to you. And so I think all of those things is another important layer of communication that you brought up. And I'm like, yeah, energy, that's huge. Even when you're recording a video, like my energy is not this high when I talk to somebody off screen. So just wanted to throw that out there.
No, it's so true. And when we were doing a lot of webinars and really approaching Zoom for the first time during COVID, we really had to learn how to be much stronger presenters and pitchers on camera. And sometimes we would see our Zoom recordings afterwards and realize how much energy you need to bring to camera for it to translate as being positive and supportive and trustworthy and fun and all of those things. Even if we just bring our regular energy, and I already run high energy, but if I just bring my regular energy, it looks flat. It's amazing how flat it can be on camera. So before, when Ralph and I would record a lot together at the time, we would always remind each other to bring the energy. And it would almost feel a little commercial in style. But then by the time you see the recording back, it comes across as being much more vibrant and interesting to listen to.
And I think the thing with energy is it shows and demonstrates that you care. And if you don't care, why should anyone else?
Totally.
Energy is infectious. Yeah. And when you are infectious about whatever you're selling, be it yourself, a property, a product, that energy is contagious. And it also works the same way as if you have no energy. And that can come across in marketing just as well as in person. If you can see a lot of energy and thought went into a presentation of a property, that resonates, especially if you see all the detail and energy and effort that went into bringing something to market in a meticulous manner. So one other question before we get off storytelling, which again, I think it could be an entire episode on its own because it is so important in sales, period, let alone just real estate. But Jess, just a heads up, this one's coming straight at you. And I want you to speak to this question from the buyer side. And it can be either overreaching or specific or both, depending upon which direction you want to take this. But from a buyer psychology standpoint, how important is storytelling? From a buyer that you're taking out showing properties to, and they see 5 properties, which properties are they going to resonate with? And how much of an impact does storytelling have on them? And if you can talk about this on a high level or a granular level or both, that's up to you. Take it away.
As a baseline, it is tremendously important to have a story connected with every single property that I show. And sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's not. I mean, we always say, which is at, I would say, the forefront of our business is we tell clients not to buy properties more often than we tell them to do so. So I pride myself in always being an objective third party, brutally honest at times. And there is a tremendous amount of research that goes into a showing that no one sees so that we can come to the table equipped with knowledge and tidbits of information that are actually valuable. Like when you walk through a home and you go, here's the kitchen. This home has 3 bedrooms. People already know that. So you need to bring something to the table so that you're not just opening a door for them and proving your value every single day. So some of the ways that I incorporate storytelling on the buy side is not only the education that leads up to how offers should be submitted and how to maximize your chances of success when it comes to multiple offer scenarios or not. But I go far beyond that, where I'll do research on the neighborhood. One thing I always do is I always look into the neighbors' backyards.
Always.
Because that tells a story in itself. I mean, if you look over the fence and you see a cute little swing set and a little sandbox, and your client wants to move into a neighborhood where they can start a family, like, this is a great way to understand the nuances of that street or that neighborhood. Conversely, if you look over the fence and it's like a hoarder and there's weird smells, those are things that directly impact your reasonable enjoyment of the property that not everyone thinks about or considers. Smaller things like great restaurants in an area, neighborhood coffee shops. One thing that I always do as well to add another level of storytelling is we try to regularly keep contact and connect with our present and past clients. So with condos especially, if I have a client that's considering purchasing a condo where I put a past client, I almost always reach out to that client and say, hey, I have someone else looking and considering the building. Is there any information that you can give us from your perspective on what it is like to live here? And that is something that our buyer clients will never get from an MLS listing, will never get from TikTok or Instagram or Google. And it's those stories that are factual that add the most value to the purchasing experience. Because let's face it, in this day and age, everyone thinks that they can do it themselves. They can watch a 5-minute YouTube video and they can be the best agent in the city. We are constantly looking for ways to add value at every single facet. And it's raising the bar and always going above and beyond that really allows you to do that.
And my follow-up question is, right now we're in a market where certain properties are sitting and others are just flying off the shelf. It's not a straightforward market like in Toronto where everything just sells. Are you noticing any type of specific trends in the properties that are selling right now versus the ones that are sitting?
Absolutely. And I've been having this conversation with a lot of clients who have called me observing these nuances and are confused by it. And what I have found to be true is that purchasers right now are extremely discerning, more discerning than they have ever been before. And part of the reason for that is they're coming online based off of the rhetoric that it's a buyer's market, they have all kinds of leverage. And when people think they have leverage, they become a little bit pickier. And so as a result, the challenged properties are sitting because people are wanting more out of their Toronto real estate. However, the good properties are still very much selling with multiple offers and reasonable sale prices. So why is that? We always talk about the fact that we have a supply problem in Toronto, which is true. But I think the thing that is less talked about is we have a quality supply problem in Toronto. Even when the market is flush with inventory, it is still very difficult, I find, to find a great property that is turnkey. You don't have to do anything to it. It's somewhere where you can live long-term, raise a family, get longevity out of. And I find that in the near decade that I have been doing this, no matter what our client's budget is, they have been disappointed when they started looking in any market. And now that people are pickier, the more challenged listings are not flying off the shelves like they used to. That sense of urgency is gone. People are not trying to get their hands on anything. Now they're saying, okay, well, if I'm going to have to kill myself to buy real estate and own real estate now at today's interest rates, I want to make sure that it's worth it.
So with the advancement in technology like virtual reality and AI-generated descriptions, where do you see the future of real estate copywriting heading? And how are you prepared for these changes? Kori?
I'm already seeing it a lot. So I have definitely dabbled in ChatGPT, which is one of obviously the AI tools that's available. And I think it's an excellent tool. I think it's amazing for generating ideas, for perhaps reworking sentence structure, for helping you navigate some challenges you might have with a paragraph or two. The one thing I can really see that's so obvious is when people are using it to write an entire social media post, an entire blog post, or an entire real estate description. I already know and I'm sure it will evolve and get better and better, but it has a very specific voice. I don't know what that is. It has a very specific voice. And I can already see in real estate listings when it's a ChatGPT real estate description because they almost all sound the same and start the same way. And I think that very effortlessly, people are going to realize when something has been AI generated, whether that be a blog post that's about content that you're interested in, whether it is a video script that somebody's just reading, or a real estate description. I think it's going to be very obvious really soon, unless people bring a little bit more imagination to the table and aren't so freaking lazy, which we all know is a huge theme in how people operate these days. So I think that it's definitely going to help. I think it has an amazing ability to be a great resource, but I don't think people should lean on it as being the only tool that's there, or else everyone's going to sound like a drone. No one's going to have an opinion. No one's going to have an imagination or sound creative or have their own unique brand identity. And when our users, whether it be on our website or reading our real estate descriptions or in engaging in our social media content, I always want them to know that it's a Fox Marin post that we wrote. And I feel like very proud of the fact that we have protected that voice over the years, and I will never relinquish that. And so, yes, I think that we will use AI. I think that that's something we should all be open to and embrace. It's coming. So I definitely don't want turn my back to it. But I definitely want to make sure that we're always speaking in that genuine, authentic, transparent, friendly, fun voice. So I think it might be a hybrid of the two over time.
And Kori, why is it so essential for brands to maintain consistency in written form and in all of its communication across all its platforms?
Trust. Every single time. That's what it comes down to.
And brand recognition, right? And every time they see that brand, they in turn pick up on that trust.
And I love the fact that people know without even necessarily going to the bottom of our post on MLS or a social media post, they already know it's a Fox Marin listing based on the photo in the first couple of sentences of the copywriting. They don't have to even scroll down to see it's listed by us. They just know. I love that. I'm so proud of that.
There's only a couple other agents in the city that I can say that about. When I see the picture and the copy, I could probably pick out who it is. But there are several others that are like that. But it's very, very, very rare and atypical. And for me, from my experience in real estate or in other businesses, it's so unbelievable how you can go onto an Instagram account and see one picture that looks like amazing or post, and then the next three are horrible. And that juxtaposition breaks the trust that you have in a brand. I don't understand how, as a consumer, I could ever work with a brand that actually has a blog and hasn't updated that blog or just taken it down that's dated from 2018. Like it shows such little attention to detail, and it shows such little ability to show a consistency of thought. Like if you're not going to use it, just take the bloody thing down. It just shows they're not even thinking about it or don't even care. So I completely agree with that. And it's something that's always on my mind. And, there's a term that I love and think about a lot for us is marketing stamina. And it really, really is a challenge to continually to do one good post is no problem. Kori, I believe you've done 1,500 fantastic posts on our Instagram account. And it's interesting. Like when I go online and I look at our past sales and our portfolio of sales, it's literally like, and Jess and I have talked about this, like each one of them has a little piece of our heart or a little piece of our soul.
Oh, yes.
And it's like watching your life flash before your eyes as you go back, because it takes you to a period of
So
time
many
and
memories.
relates an emotion or an experience with a client or something like that, which I always find.
And so just to add in there as well, I don't necessarily think the user is conscious of this all the time. They're not necessarily having a conversation with themselves saying, oh, it looks like somebody else wrote this post, or, oh, this looks like it's AI generated, or, oh, they haven't posted since 2019. It's again, it comes down to that feeling of instinct. And when they see consistent messaging, consistent brand messaging, consistent storytelling, consistent photography, consistent content production, it just gives you the feeling like these people have their shit together. This brand has their shit together. Their voice is together. I can trust them and they're hardworking.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not like they're writing a pros and cons list and able to identify all of these things. It's a feeling. And I used to teach a lot of group fitness classes as a side part-time job. And I've always did very well in teaching fitness. People always loved my classes. And yes, I did good programming. And yes, I looked the part and I had a great playlist and all of those things. But the one thing I don't think people would have been able to shout out is that I was very musical and on the beat because I was a former dancer. So I could count music in phrases and I could always hit when the beat dropped because I knew how to count music. So the class just felt better because it was on point with the beat. I don't think people would leave and be like, gosh, she was so musical and on the beat. The class just feels better when it's on the beat and when you have to do something hard when the beat drops. So it just feels better because I was able to do that. And so it's the same kind of nuance that I don't think anyone would be able to shout it out per se or call it out. It just feels good. And that's our job.
And to anybody watching this who has a Peloton, that is the exact reason why I am on Team Alex Toussaint. So just wanted to throw that out there. Jess, this pitch is coming right at you here. You are my millennial consultant personally. So if anything happens, or I'm trying to understand how the millennials as a cohort are looking or thinking, I always consult with you. I'm going to start with you on this, and I think we can all weigh in because I think this is a really interesting conversation. Do you believe the written word is dying, or is it just evolving?
I do believe that it's evolving. I think that, like I said earlier, there's nothing that can replace the look and feel and touch of reading a book and smelling those pages. And I think there's always going to be a novelty in that. So I don't think that it's dying completely. I think there will just be a special time and place for written word. And I think more people will become heavily reliant on video. Millennials want information now, fast, yesterday, and we're always on the go. We are juggling a million different things. We have careers that didn't exist 10, 20 years ago. And so I think that depending on the platform and depending on the need for it, writing or written word will continue to show its value. But I definitely think that video is going to dominate and going to continue to head in that trajectory.
Core?
1,000,000%. I would say the written word is dying for a couple of reasons. One is the fact that my dad is 75 years old and is very well educated and comes from a huge professional background and is a massive reader. And the fact that he gets his information from YouTube now tells me a lot, just that alone as an anecdote. So I definitely think that video is taking over. And the second thing is I think people are going to question the trustworthiness of the written word because of AI. And it's going to be very hard to know where something was sourced from and is this trustworthy? Add a voice behind that and some color and some flavor and some character from a real human being in a video format or perhaps audio text style narration. I think that that will 100% dominate. And I think people have no freaking attention span anymore, like zero. So I don't think people will even have the capacity or ability to sit down and read a book or a newspaper or a magazine article. Like we just watch our nephews and nieces and they can barely even watch a full movie, let alone, they've got to watch like 30-second TikTok videos because that's as much as they can take in. So I think that if anything, the written word would come back as being trendy.
Yeah.
So people being like, ooh, and then go back to, these classic books and philosophy and some historical novels. And I think it would maybe become trendy to be the antithesis of this movement, moving towards everything being quick paced. But I certainly think it's a dying breed, which is very sad, but I think it's dying. But I don't know what else is to come. So maybe there's some very exciting things to come that we don't even know exist yet.
We're going to start telepathically communicating with each other through our Apple glasses.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think, Ralph?
Oh, it's dying. I used to be an avid reader. I've probably read thousands of books. Like, I will go so far as to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely hundreds, probably in the 1,000, at least at over 1,000, I would think. And I can't read anymore. I've lost the attention span to read. And I don't feel like I have the reason to want to build the attention span back up to read. Maybe the attention span to read things that are really important to me, like the most recent draft of my will.
That was hard
example,
too. We were suffering through that.
That was Anyways, but like things that I actually have to read, I will, but I'm sure I could have probably just put that in ChatGPT and asked it to summarize it for me. And then when the verbal versions come out, I could listen to it in summary in 35 seconds. And it would then, my own personal AI lawyer would then send it back to my other lawyer with comments, and then I probably wouldn't have to do anything. So I think that's the way it's moving. A good friend and client of Fox Marin, very high up at Google, was telling me that they are doing studies and they're nervous, Google, because kids can't read the 3 lines in a Google search between the ages of 13 to 15.
Oh, you mean the preview text that comes up?
Yeah. Like when you do a search, the way they have the link with the 2 or 3 lines. And so they search for everything on TikTok or on Shorts. And that's why Google is putting so much emphasis on Shorts, because that's the way of the future. And even if you look at movies, like the only movies that are popular right now, save and except the odd Oppenheimer, are movies that have like 356 cuts every minute, right? Like watch a Fast and the Furious movie and it's just like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
So I think attention spans are getting shorter, and people's expectations as to how they want to fill their time and how they want to spend their time and their ability to do that is moving in a much different direction in tandem with technology.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely dying. I don't know. Like, we're saying video is really, really the future, which it is in terms of the way people want to consume information. But how long is it before we have our avatars reading our AI generated content in our voice? Like, I don't know. So we're definitely living in a very interesting time, and it's ever evolving. And I think the key is that the people who are at the top of their game, who are evolving with it in any industry, are always going to prevail.
Well, the idea of not having to do my hair and makeup for a video is very appealing. So I'm into that.
So how do tools currently, not in the future, like ChatGPT, Grammarly, predictive writing, support the content of written brands, either in our lens or in other lenses?
I use all of them. So ChatGPT, I don't really use it to write descriptions, but as I mentioned earlier, it might be more of an idea generator. So I'll give you an example of how I have used it. So with our YouTube channel that you're all watching and tuning into, thank you so much. We have been given some feedback that our thumbnail titles are too long and that the thumbnail titles need to be between 4 and 5 words. And I find that very challenging because I'm like, how am I supposed to summarize the subject of this video podcast in 4 to 5 words? And so what I do is go to something like a ChatGPT and write out the entire subject of what the podcast is about and say, ChatGPT, can you generate 30 title ideas between 4 and 5 words based on this subject? And it's like, and it comes up with like 30 ideas, and usually 1 or 2 I like them, or I could put them together and create a title based on the ideas it's generated. So I'll use it a lot for things like that, or questions for our podcast, or I'll also use it a lot for like neighborhood descriptions to like kickstart some of the fill copy that we need, that needs to exist and live and breathe in some of our website material or some of our listing material, but it's there aesthetically, not that necessarily people are going to be reading it. I just need to fill in gaps. Grammarly, I use all the time. So I go in there all the time to check an email before I send it, a social media post. I use it for all of our blog posts. I'm obsessed with Grammarly. I feel that Grammarly and Google is getting a little out of control with its grammar corrections now, that it's like almost like nothing is good enough. So you'll correct it to meet their standards. They'll give you the thumbs up. And then you might re-enter that same email or blog post later as you've made some changes. And then it edits itself again. I'm like, you had given this the thumbs up like 5 minutes ago, and now you're changing it again. And now I'm finding it a little bit not too sophisticated, a little ridiculous. Like I'm like, okay, like we get it. I can add another comma here. It's getting a little redundant. And I'm feeling like this, I have to be careful with, because it's starting to strip the friendliness and the voice out of some of our email exchanges and blog post writing. So I almost have to go back in and add in the Kori-isms afterwards. So I do use them, but lately I've been finding it to be a little bit out of control. Like, stop correcting. Like, we are like, I just have, there's nothing left here. I might as well just send like a bullet point message at this point. So that's sort of how I've been using some of those tools, but they are definitely in my toolkit. Use them every day, sign into all of them every day. And now I'm like, how did I ever live without any of these things before? So 100% full usage in all ways. Jess?
Definitely use them. I wouldn't say I rely on them as much, but I think that's more so the nature of where my copywriting skills are being used relative to where yours are being used. For me, I think the biggest value is that they're time savers. I think at the end of the day, people like you and I are always going to put more weight on our own voice and our own writing abilities over a computer. So I think that it helps us be more efficient at our jobs and have more time in front of the client, which is an incredible thing. Yeah, I don't know that it should ever be relied on heavily by anyone to replace writing that you would come up with on your own completely. And I think, Ralph, what you said about having difficulty just sitting down and reading a book today is something that a lot of people are experiencing, because reading and writing, like I said, it's a muscle. And if you don't use it, it starts to atrophy really quickly. And I think the longer that we as humankind goes without reading or writing, like, are we going to even have any ability to do this in 20, 30 years? Like, what is that world going to look like? So I think it's important that anyone who's using these tools is to use them in an auxiliary way where it's going to help elevate your writing, but it should never replace it.
Yeah, so I have two things on that. First of all, you guys have much better grammar than I do.
Oh, yes, we do.
Like this whole diner thing, I always get so confused. I can't remember the difference. And I'm like, thank you, Grammarly, for not making me look like a moronic.
Yeah, your grammar is really shit.
Yeah. So I do appreciate Grammarly. I think one of the downfalls of all of this, going back to what you were saying and using your brain as a muscle, is I do think, the ability to write an extended document by taking a position on something, the level of thought that goes through and the level of benefit that it takes you as the author through personally to think something through from beginning to end, something that is being lost in society because we're just looking for the short answer, the quickest way we can get it from the most reliable source that we deem to be authentic. And so what is the cost to us as individuals or as human beings to think independently of that? I don't know. Like I just pose the question because it is going to be an ongoing concern, especially if you're somebody that's born into this environment and hasn't lived to see a more free thinking environment where people have to go through the usage of their muscle to develop an opinion on something.
Totally.
I think a great example of that is, I know when I was in school, absorbing all of this information and reading various books and textbooks and literature, I felt like, when am I ever going to use this information, or will I even remember this in 10 years? And it wasn't until I finished that I realized that it's not necessarily about what you learn, but it teaches you how to think. And that was the biggest value add, is using your brain and challenging it to come up with creative thinking is such a fundamental skill that I think is becoming a lost art nationwide.
So when I first started driving, I don't mean to date myself, but there was no navigation system in the car to rely on. I couldn't go into my Google Maps and stick it into my phone. I had to memorize how to get there. Figure it out, memorize. I knew how to drive everywhere in the city without looking at a map. And if I needed a map, there'd be like a Pearlie's map in my glove compartment. And now, I've lived in Toronto most of my life. I literally use the nav to get to places I already know how to get to because I just rely on it because it's easier. That's just an example. Or spelling. I don't even bother trying to remember how to spell it. I'll just either rely on predictive analytics or predictive writing or just Google it. And I'm like, God, this is really lazy. But we have become a lot better on video. so we benefited there.
So, okay, I think we're getting close to wrapping this up.
Okay.
I just want to ask both of you, I was going to say three of you, and then talk to myself in the third person. Or would that be the second person? I think it would be the second person, but in context of the conversation, the third person, I would like to ask all three of us how we think all of this is going to impact the future of real estate from both a consumer standpoint and an agent standpoint.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with you, Kori.
Agents are going to have to be a lot more creative in their storytelling beyond the written word, which I don't think they necessarily were to begin with. So I think I think that the consumer is going to demand more from the agent. So I'm like actually just talking myself through this answer. And the agent is going to have to deliver on that in all facets of marketing and communication. And I think that includes what they demand from the aesthetic of their listing, to the demand of the client experience, to the demand of video requirements, to the demand of speed to communication. I think all of this is going to elevate. And I think this might weed out people who are not willing to go all in to service the client. And so I think that people who are imaginative, people who are willing to innovate, people who are willing to embrace these new tools so that they can service the client in a better and better way, I think are going to shine and outwit and outlast the rest, which I think is exciting and a dynamic time to be in a business that's going to evolve very quickly. I think we might see things more like virtual tours change and evolve and become part of the process, more things like the Google Glasses. I think that might become part of the process more. Virtual staging will certainly get better. We were talking about this at our team meeting the other day. So I think we're going to see the evolution of these things. But I still think at the end of the day, the fundamentals will play because this is such an emotional business. It's such a relationship business. This is a tactile business that really comes from the heart. So I think the fundamentals will still be at play, and all of these new innovations will just be additional add-ons that will evolve in a very creative and imaginative way.
Jess?
I think similar to what Kori was saying is I do think that it's going to create a natural filtering process of a lot of agents that just aren't willing to do the work or keep up with where things are going. And I also think that with automation and allowing people the ability to do it themselves, I think we're going to see a little bit more appreciation for the art of real estate. And
that would be nice.
Yeah, I know. I think that once people are forced to represent themselves, because there are already brokerages that allows somebody to do that through the use of technology, I think that the value of an agent, there's going to be a resurgence of that. I don't think that's going to happen in the short term. I think it's more of a long-term thing that we're going to see. But yeah, I think a lot of people think that transacting in real estate is easy. Representing either yourself or another party is simple. And I think that once people try to take that on their own, even if they have the most sophisticated tools, I don't think anything can really replace the value of a great agent that's going to go over and above to protect their client's best interest.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah, I think across the board, all of this new technology, AI, everything that we're talking about right now is going to kill mediocrity. I think it will crush it. And the reason why I say that is because what it essentially will do is it will allow the cream of the crop, the top in any industry, but we can limit this to real estate right now, to amplify their voice and amplify their productivity. Mm-hmm. That's what it will do. And the top of our industry will figure out how to stay on top of those trends and leverage their voice. But the problem is you have to have a voice. And as more and more AI comes out, consumers are going to crave authenticity more than anything else. And if the ones that will be able to amplify their authenticity are the ones that are going to continue to be successful, and that's what ultimately the consumer is going to want, are the best producers, the best consultants, the best advice with a personal opinion, because real estate is highly emotional. Mm-hmm. And that is why most real estate agents, good ones, are part-time psychologists, family counselors, relationship counselors, as much as they are professionals in what they do. And so, if you look historically back with the implementation of technology, opening up past solds, opening up data to the public, one would have thought that in that time period, the use of realtors would have gone down. It's gone up asymmetrically because people are just more confused than ever and need more help and guidance through all of the information. Can you imagine when there's 17 AIs all competing with each other, all telling different narratives? Things are going to shift, and they're going to shift dramatically. And I think at the end of the day, the consumer is going to win. And the people that take what they do to the highest level in terms of professionalism in our industry are the ones who are going to succeed even further. And so interesting times for sure. And we'll see how all this plays out, but it's a great time to be alive, and it's a great time to be a part of all this.
Very exciting.
So based on everything we've discussed, is there anyone who would like to add anything to this discussion? Any last thoughts? Anything that they felt that they wish they had a chance to say but didn't?
Yeah, I'm all good. I do want to say that I think that ultimately technology is a good thing, and it will allow our roles to evolve just like they have if you look at the last 10 years alone. So I'm excited to see what that looks like, and I'm ready for the challenge.
Me too.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Oh, that wraps up our deep dive into the shifting sands of written communication and the quest for brand authenticity in the digital age. As we've discussed, even in a world empowered by video, aided by AI, the essence of the written word remains potent. Whether it's evolving or being redefined, one thing's clear: a consistent brand voice is more critical than ever. Thank you so much for joining us at Fox Marin and Boots on the Ground podcast. Please be sure to stay connected, stay curious, and until the next time, keep the conversation going. Kori, is there something you'd like to add at this point?
Yes, I just want to say contact us. We're nice and we write great copy.
Yes, we do.
Awesome. And if it's one thing I want to say, if you love us, if you like us, please be sure to hit that like button and smash that subscribe button down below. comments. We love them. Just please keep them constructive and above the belt. That's it. Any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us direct. We absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you so much for sticking it out right to the end. We hope you found some of this information insightful, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.